welcome in Wrong Side of the Pond. He is DJ Schweitzer. I am Jeremy Lance. And we're going to try to put a pod on tonight. Not a whole lot going on. MLS has a game. That's, yeah. What was there anything else?
No, literally nothing else has happened in the world of soccer since we recorded last, or in the last 48 hours, or literally nothing. It's been really boring. So we're try our best to conjure together a show for you. Before you say whatever it is you're going to say next, I need to jump in and make a quick announcement here. I'm actually breaking away to start my own separate podcast that will happen in between our podcasts on a regular basis. So it's not. But
it won't affect. I mean, how would it possibly affect our podcast?
It won't. Right? It won't. It will also be about American soccer and European soccer. So it's not meant to replace.
But you won't just use all the good topics for that podcast. You'll leave the topics for this one, right?
Yeah, we can talk about the same. We can talk about the same thing on both of them. It'll be cool.
Right. All right. Hey, what could go wrong?
Nothing. It'll be called Wrong Side of the Ocean. Nothing too unique about that either.
Wrong Side of the Supercast.
Yeah, right. Big things, obviously, to talk about. My show is fake. I don't have enough time or concentration to record anything longer than what we put into this show each week, and that's minimal effort at most. But we are going to talk at length this week about the now defunct European Super League and its impact on the world of soccer over the last 48 hours. There were a couple times where I thought about messaging you and being like, hey, should we do an emergency pod? And I'm really glad we didn't, because everything changed.
Yeah. Because, what if we did like Monday night? If we did one, it would have been worthless by Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah, maybe even by Tuesday morning at that point.
Everyone keeps comparing it to Firefest, which is a funny comparison. But to be fair to Firefest, people at least showed up actually got all the way to Firefest before it fell apart.
Yeah, like people actually wanted to participate in Firefest.
Yeah.
Outside of the people who'd be putting on, the performances or whatever else. Like there was an audience that desired Firefest. Unlike this European Super League, where there appears to be literally no interest from the masses, at least on any sort of wide scale on that. Now, but real quickly, because this is going to literally be the bulk of this week's show, we need to get the formalities of fantasy out of the way, because nobody's holding us over the fire on it. But 15 shows in a row, Tyler Kelly's Ole Can't Drive is still on top of our Premier League Fantasy League. You and I both went up this week.
You did it, bud.
Yeah, way to go, Tyler. I went up one spot to 48th. You went up 3 places to 87th. Over in the MLS League, week 1 is in the books. Just 14 people in the league so far. Poor participation, people. Really just disappointing. So if you want to join, you can still join in on that league. But I'm dead last in there. So if you want to, feel good about beating up on me, that's awesome. You're currently sitting in first place. I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
We did it, folks.
Yep. Long way to fall down to 14th here.
We're going wire to wire.
Yeah. So looking forward to seeing you down in my neck of the woods at the table in the very near future. There's your fantasy updates. Let's get back into the European Super League and its ripples that will continue, I think, to cause waves in the sport for the foreseeable future. And man, I mean, like, where do you want to start with this thing? Because I think everyone kind of knows the gist now. 12 teams try to break away,
right?
Start their own thing, and all of them pretended like it was some altruistic thing for the sport, and we all know it was just a giant cash grab, right? Like, that's all it was.
Yeah. Let's I don't know. Let's. I don't know if we want to do like moment by moment, but like let's go back to the start of this, at least of this, not of the start of the idea of a Super League, because that would take it back to like the 80s. Back to Sunday, when all this like starts. Like, Saturday there was some rumors, there was some reports going out. Um, at that time it was like, hey, there's possibly going to be this league, and my favorite part of the early rumors was that broadcasting juggernaut DAZN was going to be the broadcasting partner for this whole operation. Um, and, and so it was like, I don't know about you, but when I first heard it on Saturday, like just the rumors, I was just like I had one of my buddies text me and he was like, hey, like, what do we think about this? I'm like, I don't know. I don't like expending energy on this because we've heard about this Super League now for years. Like, am I supposed to really think this is going to be the time? And by Sunday, it was, oh yeah, this is apparently going to actually be the time.
Yeah, I mean the timeline for all this stuff, at least this time around, because what you were hinting at, right? Like this has happened before. Like there's been a group of clubs that formed an association that then all threatened to break away, and that's how we got the Champions League in its current incarnation, or at
Right.
least its original incarnation. Back in 1993 was the first season for that. And they've threatened to break away several times since then, and almost every time that has then coincided with a reconciliation with UEFA and then some modifications to the Champions League format to better suit the rich clubs and make sure that they get more of the cut of the pie they feel they deserve.
Sure.
And so when you're right, like when we all heard this rumor kind of spring, I was thinking like Friday night, I think roughly when we really started to like it gained momentum to the point where you're like, hey, maybe there's something to this time. But yeah, it felt a lot like deja vu. And with all the talk of the Champions League format revision that UEFA's basically getting ready to unveil, it really felt like, yeah, well, this is just the whole thing again. Like this.
Yeah. This again.
Yeah, right. But then those 12 synchronized releases hit on Saturday morning where all those big clubs, yours and mine included, dropped the metaphorical hammer, and it became a lot more real when in those releases you read the line JP Morgan Chase is underwriting this. Like that's the first time I feel like there was like a serious financial institution that had like been like, yep, we're involved in this process now. And I think when I read
which means that like this was pretty far down the road, right? Like,
oh yeah,
you don't throw out that like one of the biggest banks or investment whatever things is backing you. Like, you don't put that in an official release, and you don't get to that point with a JP Morgan until like a lot of research, a lot of track has been laid, right?
Yeah, I mean, and to the tune of $3.5 billion worth of track, right? So I think that's when I sat up and was like, oh shit, like this is actually a thing.
Yeah. Oh, when I saw those statements, like, I don't know about you, but like I had a sinking feeling in my stomach.
Oh,
like,
definitely.
Oh God, this is actually happening.
Yeah, I mean, this is like the perfect way to describe it is like the nuclear option, right? Like this is what everyone has been speculating for years is like, when would all the big clubs grow the balls to actually like quit threatening it and just finally follow through? And we've all talked about like the ramifications and the fallout from that type of endeavor happening. And so it was very like everyone kind of knew exactly what would happen if it actually came to pass, because we've all talked about this endlessly for like eons.
Well, and I think you kind of said the right phrase there, like the nuclear option. Like, we all went to bed Sunday going like, wow, the soccer landscape as we know it is literally going to be blown to pieces.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like you described that sinking feeling, and it was like, oh no, they did it. Like they actually pressed the button.
Yeah.
And I genuinely had a bit of a panic about it. Like it was one of those things where I was like, man, like like there are so many clubs that are going to die from this. Like this is going to hasten the death of like so many fan bases and so many cultures and so many things. And people, man, I understand like the idea of people wanting to see the best of the best, and like, why not? Like Alexi Lawless is always talking about the build the better mousetrap thing. And I understand that concept, but it's also like, but that mousetrap is going to literally like kill all of the mice. Like
Right.
it's going to kill all
Like
of the
you didn't
mice.
build you didn't build a mouse trap to catch a mouse. You plan was actually to just burn the house down at this point, and that's how you were going to trap the mice
Yeah.
by burning the house down around it.
I don't know. I don't know about you, and I'm sure we'll learn more details about this. But it was a very like conflicting feeling as a fan of a club who was wrapped up in this process. Because on one hand, I was going like, oh, I'm so ashamed. Like I'm so mad that they're involved in this. And then as a club who's definitely like one of the minnows in that like group of 12, like I was also going like, well, like at least I don't have to watch my club die now. Like that was
Right.
literally, and I felt even more guilty about that. Like that made me feel even more mad at Spurs for getting involved, because then I was like, but I like now I have to knowingly watch all these other clubs die and like try to not like dance on their grave.
Watch those die for the sake of your team's solidified success.
Yeah. And I mean, as much as I want success, like like put your Spurs in a European Super League, they're still going to be Tottenham. Like they're still going to most likely crap the bed in the worst of circumstances. And like everyone's always talking about like, well, who's going to be like the worst team of those big teams every year, and like basically signed up to be the whipping child. And I was like, Tottenham, like it's for sure Spurs. Yeah. And
basically all of North London was going to be the doormat there.
Yeah, and maybe not in the long term, like, if this had actually come to pass.
Yeah, I mean, the idea. Yeah, I mean, I think the idea would be like if these 15 teams are solidified in there, like it would give you this not only just financially the buying power, but like what we already kind of see with Champions League, like the best players they want to play for teams playing in the biggest competitions, right?
Yeah.
It should be, and again, this is then what creates the issue of then the widening gap of the haves and the have-nots, and you just separate this like elitist Yaz Island worth of soccer elites, and then let just the rest of the soccer world just slowly sink into the ocean by themselves as they get farther and farther away from you. And I think that's what it was going to be, like this self-fulfilling, like if we create this, it sustains us and it grows us and it builds us, but at the same time, it's then kind of killing everything else in its process.
Yeah. The other thing that I thought was really funky about like the math that they presented, and I'm sure everyone saw this thread kind of doing the rounds, but like there was this assumption that all these teams were going to generate like this new TV deal that would, fork out, and the estimates that were being tossed about were wild, like $4 to $6 billion a year, kind of in the neighborhood of an NFL annual TV contract, right? And I think what we were seeing is that like being the assumption and kind of like, hey, that this is what will happen.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is like it also kind of assumed that all of the other leagues would keep at least a portion of their revenues, and at least as they currently exist. And the problem with that is that like if you add all that money together, that ends up to a number far larger than what's currently being spent on television rights deals for, soccer across Europe and elsewhere. So basically it was like expecting money to appear out of thin air to back all of this. And if it's not making that assumption, then that means that the clubs know that they would siphon most of the money away from the other leagues and ultimately kill them. Like there are smart people who are behind these things, and at least billionaires who have good accountants who are running the numbers on these kind of things to an appropriate.
They know exactly what the outcome is going to be.
Exactly. So they're not stupid enough to think that money is going to fall out of the air and suddenly there's going to be enough TV money for everyone to go around and everyone will be happy. They're very aware that money doesn't exist. So that means they know that it was going to kill everyone else off. And
that's the one thing. I mean, and that's the one thing that guys like John Henry and whatever his name, Glazer, are going to have to somehow, and they're already in spin control now, but like rectify the fact that like we're not stupid. Like we understand, like you had to have known the totality of what this all would have meant. And for you to say in your statements then and now that this was all about, growing the game and solidifying the success of the club and of soccer in that country, like you had to know that what you were saying was complete garbage.
Yeah, I mean, Florentino Perez from Real Madrid has been just flapping his ass cheeks in the wind down there in Spain ever since this news has hit. And like everything that came out of his mouth not only was just like a patented lie, but it was like craziness. Like he lost all concept of what people cared about with soccer. And when UEFA and FIFA were threatening booting all of these clubs' players out of international competitions, Perez was saying like, we'll start our own World Cup. Like, and then, they were saying like, well, it's asking a lot of all these players playing domestic leagues and
doesn't that
these
technically already exist?
Yeah,
like
right.
An independent World Cup?
Yes, it does. It absolutely does. For like non-recognized regions and autonomous zones and things like that. Yeah, they'd all go join that one. But then, he's also talking about like, well, we'll deal with the increase in number of games to the players' calendars between the domestic and this new season by shortening the game length to 60 minutes. And it's kind of like, what?
So now we're just completely bastardizing the general concept of the game.
Exactly. And it became evident and clear that the intentions of the Super 12 or whatever the hell you want to call them were not altruistic. And like you were saying, like now everyone's in spin and damage control, and you got John Henry trying to be like, oh, I was doing this for the betterment of the club and your club, and it's kind of like, nah, dude, you're trying to make some bones off of all of this. Like that's what this is about. So yeah, it's very frustrating knowing that our club was caught up, my club at least. I'm sure you probably feel the same way, but that your club was caught up about this. And there are a lot of teams like in that group that I'm used to considering villains, like a City and Chelsea and Real Madrid and Juventus. And it's really easy to be like, yeah, there those villains are again. But my club's a villain now too.
Yep, you're in the mud with us now. I think I think our buddy Matt Brew said something pretty good about that. As he's a Chelsea supporter, that so many clubs just some of these clubs like Tottenham just got it. Here at Chelsea, we were born into it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the old Bane gif, right? And part of it, like my wife and I were talking about it, like, and I said this earlier. Deep down, I was kind of like, well, I'm a little relieved that we're in, and you understand why a club like Spurs would want to be in that equation, as we've tried to lift ourselves into the relevancy of the European elite for the last 20 years. And this was a ticket in. And if you say no now, like for the same reasons that they all said yes, if you say no, you're basically condemning yourself to death unless you have some mega billionaire craziness backing you that can sustain you through this. Or like in Germany, where everyone is owned by the fans and they literally can't approve this unless the fans say they want it to happen. So it's just a much different equation to think about. And, you almost don't fault someone for saying, like, if it was offered, do you say no and then put the gun in your mouth? Like, it's just a really weird spot. And I'm not trying to look for sympathy for me or for Dan Levy or anyone along those lines. But it has really done a number on my like fan buy-in to the club anymore. And I maybe I'm lying to myself over the last 20 years about how much fans still matter to their clubs. But this was like a very clear sign, at least from a Spurs perspective, but I'm sure elsewhere, the clubs don't give a crap about us. Like all they see us as is dollar bills.
Well, yeah, and that is where kind of the rubber met the road. And I heard Roger Bennett from the Men in Blazers in a number of interviews over the past 24 hours kind of throw this out, like, you know, ultimately what happens in this is that the Blazers, the Henrys, the Abramoviches, the Levies, all these guys, they knew what they were doing, and they knew that it was going to cause outrage from the Fulham fans, from the West Ham fans, from the championship level and lower league level fans. But I think what they all fans or all owners miscalculated in this is how much their own fans were going to be against this. I think there was I don't know if it was a machismo or some kind of just arrogance or just the fact that they're just billionaires living in a bubble and just have no concept of actual reality down on the ground level here with actual humans. I think they thought, hey, here we are. We're going to go to this league, and that's a big thing for us. And now you as a fan will be happy because now we're better than everybody, and this is kind of in the whole banter society that is like, hey, now this is one-upsmanship. Now we're just elite. We're better than everybody. And I think they miscalculated the fact that at the heart of 90% of soccer fans globally, it's much deeper than just being like the fans of the biggest clubs and the biggest competitions. Like the sport as a whole matters, the competition matters, the league, the communities, all of that matters, the history matters, and that stuff matters more to us than it ever does and ever will to them.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's that like I'm carrying a skateboard around the high school and trying to pretend to be a teenager again, right? Like, hey, this is what I know what it's like to be a fan, and this is what the fans want. And just because I have acres of dollar bills for my backyard, that doesn't mean that I don't understand the common man. And they definitely like misjudged just how hard the fan bases bucked up against that, and their own included. But I'm not. I don't want to like give fans too much credit here because I don't think it was the fans on their own that pushed this thing over the edge. And I spent a lot of time kind of thinking about like why this all fell through. Like what were they banking on that made them so confident to press the nuclear button this time around? And what was enough to make them all go like, oh shit, like we shouldn't have done that. And there are a couple clubs that have yet to really like have that honest like, sorry, we shouldn't have done that moment. But I think it was a combination of like the players hardcore, I think, were against this. I think they all, as a player, a lot of these guys didn't come up through the academy at the club that they're at now, right? Like
right.
they started somewhere small and then through that small club then earned, maybe a promotion with that team to a new division, which got them more eyeballs, or, maybe they played in a cup competition against a bigger team and that earned them a move. And then maybe they got into the Champions League and then that earned them a move to, a big team on a grander stage in a bigger league. And so a lot of these guys have climbed the ladder and know the value that all these other pieces outside of the shining lights of Madrid and Barcelona and Milan, like they understand the value that they add to this system. And so I think the owners really underestimated how bad their own stock, for lack of a better word of how the owners probably actually think about their players, that their own stock would be opposed to, actually putting through this thing. I think deep down they're probably like, hey, these guys will get paid more, so they'll probably be fine with it.
Yeah, they want they want to be at the highest level, and we're gonna create the new highest level. So that's what they want. Yeah, I think part of that right there, I think also boils down to just the way that this all came about, and maybe it was because it started to get leaked, and so all the clubs just pushed that send button on that press release on Sunday. But all of these owners are not public front-facing people at those clubs. But the players are, the managers are, the board members, lower-level board members are. And those were the people that were getting all of a sudden pressed with all of these questions and had the cameras in their face asking them how they felt. And I think because of how this kind of hastily all of a sudden came out on a Sunday, the club, these owners did not do their own employees any goodwill by just throwing this out there and be like, oh yeah, and you're going to be the ones that are going to have to publicly deal with this.
Well, I mean, I think part of it was they probably knew there would be some objections. So they're like, oh, we don't need to put this out now because then the players will leak it out. The players they already hate the players for leaking everything out anyway. And so, they were hesitant to go to them. And then what it did is because all these people were unprepared to answer it, they were angry about it, right? They felt unprepared and undercut and left exposed. And then the other side of it too is you talk about the players and the managers and the board members and whomever that were opposed to it, but then there's like the lower level staff that have to deal with it. Like as someone who's been an admin for a social media account for a club, I can tell you the amount of abuse that gets sent that direction. And yeah, you can be like, well, just, ignore it. But it's hard to ignore that much hate funneled into your face. Specifically, that's not an easy burden to carry. And the thing that I thought was the most amazing in the aftermath of all these releases, and then the media sticking microphones in players and coaches' faces, was Manchester City's own Twitter account tweeting out Pep Guardiola's opposition quotes to the league itself. So it showed you, like, within the club setup itself, like there was extreme opposition where people were taking like the risk of their job. And I'm slightly kidding here, but also not kidding at all. Like, you do know what the owners of Manchester City are willing to do to people who speak ill of them publicly. So maybe it wouldn't just be your job that was at stake, but maybe something slightly larger. But that's a risky thing to take on. I think nobody was prepared to handle this in any capacity. And there was no like real plan for how this news would drop. And while these guys may have had all the money in the world behind it, they were woefully underprepared for the PR that they had to have known was going to blow back in their face.
Right.
And if you're going to have like something like that, you've got to have like a very concrete, like strong position. We're all going to stand here and like, this is how you lean into the wind. And
I think they had to have fully vetted their club, whether people were with it or not. They needed to be like, hey, this is what we're doing. This is the company line. And they needed to be a little more, they probably needed to plan that out a little bit, and they didn't. Instead, it was just like, here's a press release, and then just let madness ensue.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, you have Petr Cech out there trying to calm down thousands of Chelsea fans who are stopping the Chelsea players' bus from entering Stamford Bridge.
Love that idea. Yeah, I like the concept of them being like, well, how are we going to get the bus in? And they're like, send the guy out with the metal plate in his head. Yeah. Like, just send. He's got a built-in hard hat
out by himself.
Yeah.
To just figure it out.
Maybe he's got that foam helmet somewhere. He can take it out there to protect him from anything that gets thrown his direction. That easily one of the best visuals of this entire process.
Those will be some iconic images.
Oh, for sure.
He's him in that sea of anger, just trying to get a word in and trying to calm down masses to no avail.
brave man, that Petr Cech. So look, we've talked about the fans, we've talked about the players, we've talked about the club staff who've been in opposition to it. But I think, and obviously we've talked a little bit about like UEFA and FIFA who swung heavy and were like, we're gonna kick all you guys out of everything.
Right. They went for their nuclear option.
They did.
Which was, hey, we own the international registration for all these players, and we can make it a real problem for them.
Yeah. And I think, while it seemed the right thing to do, and it also was really hypocritical because those two are like the biggest money hungry power grabbers in their own right.
The enemy of my enemy.
But right. But also, like, what I find frustrating about their approaches is it was ultimately toothless because their power comes from those big tournaments, right? Like, yeah, they're the governing bodies and blah, 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 blah. But really, it's those big tournaments that, like, give them their power. And ultimately, if the big players aren't at those big tournaments, like, their big tournaments aren't big anymore. So I think that was a really, like, loose kind of bluff, like, hey, we'll do that. Not to mention that, and as some people on Twitter were really clearly pointing out in a way that I won't do here, it seems like there's some legal precedent in sports that actually favors the Super League in this type of situation, and most likely they would have won out in any sort of ensuing legal battle that may have unfolded should the big clubs have stuck to their guns. But what I think really pushed this all over the edge, and this might actually be the first time in history that like Brexit has proven itself useful, is when the UK government actually said, we're not going to issue visas for any of your foreign players anymore. Like, I think that's when the hammer dropped, because suddenly those clubs knew they can't be in this Super League with just English players. Like, that's not possible.
But I think that goes back to the miscalculation of what the reaction was going to be. And again, they knew that there was going to be angry fans from other clubs. They knew there was going to be opposition from prominent voices. But again, I don't think they expected like the British government to say, we're just going to throw up any obstacle we can to make problems for you if you go ahead with this.
Yeah, I mean, and you can kind of understand the stance of the billionaires there. They're very used to the government doing exactly what they want. So
yeah.
But I think, again, that plays into like the popularity of soccer within the masses in Europe and how important culturally it is. And it really, this is what I think that right there is where this really shines the light on how these owners really don't understand the common man. And even more importantly, if you look at the composition of the board for the Super League, of the 5 members, 3 of them were Americans. Stan Kroenke of Arsenal, Joel Glazer of Manchester United, and John Kerry's lookalike from Boston that's in control of Liverpool. And that, I think, is the driving force here, right? I think this is 3 Americans that have their American model that they're trying to bring over into Europe to control revenues and funnel more of them into their own pockets.
Sure. Well, I mean, because look at all those 3 owners you mentioned. They're all owners of American teams in American formatted leagues, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Fenway Sports Group obviously owns the Red Sox. Kroenke owns multiple American teams. The Rams, the Denver Nuggets, I think there's a few other ones in there, and then obviously the Glazers own the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which I do want to point out. I heard British broadcasters in interviews refer to the Glazers as being very successful NFL owners, which is a statement that wasn't true prior to this past NFL season.
Yeah, right.
They actually were terrible NFL owners up until the time they fell backwards into Tom Brady and got that to happen for them without really any actual effort of like any kind of good stewardship towards owning an NFL team.
Yeah, no, I mean but what you're getting at is the point I was at, which is these were guys who don't understand the cultural difference over there. I'm sure they were probably making impassioned arguments to their other board members and to the other heads of these clubs saying, look, our fans love it over here in this franchise system. Like they're content with that. Why wouldn't they be the same thing over here? And I think they convinced not just themselves and the group that they've had here, but they also had this was like the perfect time, because if you look at some of these big clubs that joined in on this party, a lot of them are desperate for money right now, like desperate.
Barcelona, the Spanish clubs that are in there, yeah.
Oh yeah, Barcelona are a trash fire. Like their financial situation is ruinous almost. Atletico Madrid have like a non-demolished stadium next to their stadium because they can't afford to knock over their old one. But Real Madrid, everyone thought they were doing cool, but now the whispers are starting to sound like they are actually also in ruinous position with their finances. Milan,
Italian football has always been a house of cards.
Yeah, right. And so you start getting a very clear picture as to how all of this was kind of set up, and the time was right to press the nuclear option because a lot of these clubs are like backs against the wall almost with their financial situations. So I think the Americans in here really like sold the narrative to a bunch of people who were desperate to ignore the cultural things that they were probably more attuned to than what the Americans were.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think as much as I think some outlets are probably harping on the American aspect of maybe a little too much, I do think there is something to the fact that like in America culturally with sports, as much as we're passionate and rabid, we do put up with things that they don't put up over there. The whole franchise model. Let's go back to Stan Kroenke. This is also a man that did the other thing that is unthinkable other places, which is he just took a NFL team that just wasn't doing the numbers right in St. Louis and said, you know what, you now are in Los Angeles.
Yeah, which is
and that same NFL team had done that move twice already.
Yeah, I know. Back and forth to the same city even. And yeah, it's just that wouldn't be tolerate. Well, we've seen it happen once before over in Europe, and it went not well. And yeah, you're right. Like the European fans and culture just don't accept that type of thing. Now, we're talking.
You mentioned it happened once before, and it is deemed as this like rare, horrible, scandalous thing where like the Rams leaving St. Louis was just kind of like, hey, about that.
Yeah, like the inevitable almost. So here's, we're talking about the speculation as to why this all happened, right? Let's now consider for a second, was this all a false flag operation so that we all ignored the also crappy Swiss model that's coming for the Champions League makeover?
You going full Alex Jones mode over here?
I'm not. Well, I mean, yeah, maybe a little bit. And all the toads are turning gay from all the hormones in the water right now. But I think
obviously.
Yeah, right. And you look at this Swiss model for the Champions League revamp, and if you've not really looked into it, it is also like super atrocious. And like there's literally two guaranteed positions for clubs who are trash and don't qualify, but they want the TV viewership numbers that come along with them. So there's an element of the Super League that's built into the new Champions League model as well. And so I'm not opposed to the theory that that's maybe part of this equation, right? Where they're like, hey, maybe that's what got the ball rolling on the conversations, like, hey, we need to fix this. And then the Swiss model came up, and then the other group was like, no, what if we finally hit the button? We're like, what if we did that? And then they were like, oh, maybe that's not a bad idea. And then
that was how it was kind of framed, that the Super League was in opposition essentially to the coming changes and now changes that have been approved for the Champions League that happened on Monday. You're right, all in the midst of this.
Yeah.
That totally got buried in the back pages. That You're moving to a larger format for both Champions League, Europa. You're adding some third competition that I still don't even understand what that even is.
Mm-hmm.
Who's playing in that? Reading? What? Like who is playing in that tournament?
As things are currently lining up, probably Tottenham.
Okay, so Tottenham and Norwich will be in that, and
Yep.
then and then and part of expanding the Champions League and Europa format, you're moving to basically doubling the amount of group stage matches. You're going to move to a 10 match group stage. We already, you have I don't know if Klopp is going to mentally handle it, because I mean he and other managers complained so much about the stresses of the schedule. You're now adding 4 additional Champions League matches that will not mean as much. Like, I don't know what's really being accomplished with that, but there's going to be 4 more to jam into this schedule, plus whatever else.
Yeah, and that's a minimum of 4 more. If you tend to fall into the middle of the pack in this new enlarged table for the Champions League format, you could also have 2 additional games that get added in prior to you actually making it to the round of 16. So it creates a lot of extra havoc for the players, and we've heard that everyone talk about the continuous ask and endless increase on the amount of games that they're trying to stuff into these players' schedules. And these guys aren't robots. Like, they are going to break down at some point. And I think that's part of the reason the players bucked so hard against the Super League to begin with, is they're kind of like, you can't keep asking all of this for us and not tell us about any of this stuff too. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not convinced that this was just a giant operation to conceal or make us all feel better about that setup. I'm not going to like that setup either. I like the current setup of the Champions League, but change is going to come in one form or another. And now I think the real question is not so much what is the Champions League going to look like. I think we have to ask what does the punishment look like, or is there even going to be any punishment?
Well, I mean, and we don't know how that's going to work out. There's a big push that the other 14 teams in the Premier League need to get together and formulate how they will take care of the betrayal that was acted upon them by these 6 clubs. I would say, and I don't know what'll end up happening. I doubt points. I also think points is unfair because, as we've just kind of chronicled, the players and the managers were almost unanimously against this. So you're punishing the 3 groups of people against it: the players, the managers, and the fans, when you take points away, right?
Sure.
Those were the people that would have never signed off on this at any point.
Right.
And made that pretty clear. I think, and I forget exactly how it breaks out, so maybe you'll have to help me on this one, but what if the money that you get at the end of the season for where you finish, if those 6 teams have to forfeit it for the year, which sucks to be City, by the way.
Yeah, for them to give up the champions' money is not an easy one to turn down. Look, of all the things I've heard discussed, that's the one from my fan perspective that goes, okay, I'll take that. That doesn't sting that much. But I just don't know, for a lot of these clubs, that's almost a drop in the water, for their annual revenue. And
right.
You wonder, is it enough? And I on one hand, I don't want to punish the fans, right? I don't want my enjoyment in the sport to suffer because my team were idiots. That seems unfair to me and to the players, just like you're describing. But I feel like examples need to be made of everyone that participated in this, because if that doesn't happen, the clubs saw how far they could get away with in this scenario if they go unpunished. And what's to say that they're not going to learn from that and figure out the appropriate way to wriggle out next time.
Oh, I mean,
And
this was just a battle won in a war that will be waged for years, decades. These billionaire owners are always going to have the want to maximize profits. That is always going to exist. So whether it's the Super League this year or the big picture last year or whatever dumb thing they'll come up with next year, there's always going to be something that they're going to try to do to squeeze every extra dollar out of their little plaything to them. This club.
yeah,
It's always going to be. This was just a battle that has been fought and won for today. Tomorrow we go again.
the war wages on, and hate to ruin it for everyone, but people with the money usually win the war.
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah, they can hold their breath for longer.
I do think, going back to the punishment, I do think it does need to be a financial one, because that affects the people that made the mistake, which is the owners.
Sure.
So I think it needs to be an off the field financial punishment, whether that's like, hey, guess what? Guess who's only getting a third of their TV money next year, or I don't know what.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. I think the other one that like makes the most logical sense is a European ban, right? Like you guys tried to make your own little European thing. Well, now you don't get to play in Europe. And to me, that like seems the most like just way of handling it, right? Like, hey, like this is exactly what you were trying to do. Like, let's now deny you that same thing you were trying to deny to everyone else. And I think that feels very altruistic and unrealistic as well. Like Manchester City clearly violated financial fair play rules. Like they clearly violated it. There were emails that like framed them up perfectly. Everything was there, but they got out on the technicality over the legality of how those emails were actually gathered. And I understand that, blah, 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 blah. There, rules need to be followed. But City broke the rules and got caught and literally got no punishment for it. So that has me very convinced that like nothing will actually happen to them. Like points deductions, maybe. It won't be enough to like shift City's title away from them, like, slap everyone with 2 points. That was fair, right? And then they'll move on with things. But I do feel like some sort of actual example needs to be made of them. Otherwise, they're going to come back smarter and stronger next time around.
Yeah, something's got to happen. I don't know if we're at a moving on point or not, but I did want to throw out like a few tidbits of things that I learned over the course of this just utter chaos that ensued. Also, we didn't even mention the fact that Ed Woodward just walked off the gig at some point during all this madness.
Suddenly, United fans feel okay about the Super League.
Yeah, not all bad, I guess, right?
Right.
Interesting thing I learned, number one. DAZN, so the network that was allegedly going to be the rights holders, I don't know if that was like in Europe or the UK or globally or what, because they do operate basically everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Streaming service, so why wouldn't you? In the US, DAZN, which I think they have like boxing. I couldn't tell you what else is on this channel right now.
Sure.
It costs $19.99 a month.
Whew. It's like Flow Sports.
More than your Netflix subscription. And it costs as basically like a third of an entire YouTube TV subscription.
No thanks.
No thanks. Other tidbit I learned, and I don't know where it actually factored in as far as tipping the scales with Chelsea, was the club apparently has what is known as the Chelsea pitch owners. And that is a, like, I don't know if it's kind of like a shell nonprofit thing, but it kind of is this weird thing where back in the 90s, they formed this thing called the Chelsea Pitch Owners, and there's like its own shareholders and everything. But to kind of move some stuff around, they put in basically under that group was the stadium's freehold or whatever for like the operation of the stadium is actually owned by this nonprofit, and the naming rights of Chelsea Football Club are also under that. So that group was in the process of getting a meeting with the board where they were allegedly going to threaten them that if you went to the Super League, you were going to need to go find a new place to play at and go name yourself something else.
Amazing stuff.
And here's the best kicker of it all. The president of the Chelsea Pitch Owners is none other than Aston Villa number 2, John Terry.
Oh, amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. Imagine John Terry cock blocking Chelsea out of the championship.
How amazing would that be? What a turn of events.
It would have been amazing. Suddenly from villain to hero.
What if that's what we find out? Like, we find out, like, in 6 months, like, you know, all the tell-all in-depth investigation gets pushed out on this, and it's like, yeah, what tipped Chelsea over the edge, which then tipped all these other clubs over the edge, was John Terry told Abramovich and the board, you're losing your name and your field if you even think about doing this. And they were like, well, I guess John Terry just saved football. What if that's what we find out? I don't know. I mean, M. Night Shyamalan can't even come up with that one.
No, I don't even know that I'd be comfortable with that scenario. I can't like him.
No,
that's not something I'm prepared for.
But yeah, I mean, literally as a Chelsea fan since like the year 2000, this is the first I've known of this, really. Of like, I've known of that group. I did not realize that they literally owned the naming rights of the club and the actual like operational ownership of the stadium.
The things the Super League has taught us.
The more you know.
That's right. Yeah, I think that it puts a nice little bow on, you know, what we've taken from this equation. Hopefully, this will simmer down and everyone can go back to hating modern football as it was in the very near future. But I have a bad feeling this is going to stretch on for way longer than I would like for it to.
We want to go back to hating the less threatening, more enjoyable version of modern football, not the very scary and apocalyptic version that cropped its head up over the week.
Yeah, that definitely was dragging us back into 2020 here really quickly.
So with that, I go with other news. You guys fired your manager.
Thank God. I needed something this weekend to really just get me moving and feeling positive about things. And waking up on Saturday morning to seeing Jose got canned was definitely near the top of my weekend's like events. Like it was definitely the highlight of my weekend, and especially in the sense that I just didn't expect it to unfold this weekend or really at all. Like I thought.
Well, it happened. It happened. I thought it happened Monday.
Did it Monday? I don't even know what day.
Everything's blurring together this week. Yeah, I forgot you guys also played on Friday, which feels like 12 days ago at this point.
Yeah, I guess you're right. It was Monday now that I'm looking at this. My weekend was definitely all screwed up. I was playing on Friday. Spurs played again today on Wednesday. It's been really hard to get my days aligned here. Not to mention that I work from home, so it's every day feels like every other day anymore. But yeah, I mean, Jose's gone. Ryan Mason.
Like initially, you see those words pop up on like your Twitter feed when you wake up on Monday morning. Like, was it a sense of relief?
Yeah, but also confusion, right? Like we brought Mourinho in busted up our whole setup to get him into this position. And it was explained exclusively as like, hey, we're trying to win trophies. And literally the only trophy he had us in contention for, they play for this coming weekend. And like you like I'm amazed that we didn't just let him get through that game. And that shows you just how crap and disastrous everything actually was within the club for them to have pulled that trigger, because you know that Daniel Levy was in his head going, like, this is what I brought this guy here for. Like,
Right.
let me at least like get him to give me one of these,
Or
and then I can deal with it.
or was the situation so untenable that they thought, goodness, if we let him play that manage that match and they win, and he wins our first trophy in like a decade or so, we can't fire him.
Oh, I think that 1,000,000% played into it. And I wouldn't even be shocked if there was some sort of contractual thing that they were trying to avoid, right? Like if you gave them a trophy, they probably had to give them like $30 million or something stupid. So I'm certain that there was a financial aspect to this that is like the reason why they decided to pull the trigger when they pulled the trigger. But the timing of it just feels so weird, given that they brought him in exclusively for the trophy winning purposes and then booted him out the door and replaced him with a guy who's never managed, literally the week before that actual trophy gets contested for.
It's a wild one.
It is a wild one.
It wouldn't be a Jose exit if it wasn't just an absolute weird one. Like, just, hey, oh wow, that just happened at this time. Okay then.
It's definitely very rarely a mutually exclusive kind of, happy trails, Jose. It's one of those get out of here. Like, just get out.
Yeah, I don't know. Will he ever have that where he just leaves quietly and politely and everybody's on good terms? And
no, because even like the only time he really did that was at like Inter or maybe when he left Porto to go to Chelsea the first time.
But those are times that basically he made the jump, right?
Yeah, right. But in those scenarios too, like at least with Inter, yeah, he left them like, on his own terms and, on a high with them winning the Champions League. But he also left like a trail of chaos behind him. Like the club was in tatters for like 5 to 6 years after he left because of the way he disassembled everything. So he just, this is what he does. He needs to be in the storm, and the storm has consumed him once again. And now Spurs are left figuring out what the hell they're doing for the 50th time in the last decade.
How bad did it get in that locker room? Like, we're hearing reports now that he lost, and I don't think I've ever heard this said about a manager in a while, 100% of the locker room.
Yeah, it sounded like it got pretty bad in there. And where it really you could tell things were getting bad was a couple weeks ago after, I can't remember what specific loss it was, but Hugo Lloris was in the post-match press conference area, and people were asking him questions about it. And he literally like spilled out like, oh, the state of this locker room right now, like the results we're getting are good, given the state of what's going on in the club right now. And literally, I remember Amy and I, my wife, were sitting on the couch, and we both turned and looked at each other like, oh wow, because Hugo's not one of those players who's like raising a stink and talking in the media a bunch. Like, he's definitely not that type of guy. So when he like lets something slip like that, that's enough for you to go like, wow, there might be something really amiss in here. And if you watch this team play week in and week out, like you kind of know, like this team they just aren't fighting for each other. They're not all on the same page really. And like Jose does this everywhere he goes. So it's so easy. Like even if you weren't on the inside, he's the cause of it because he's done this everywhere else he's gone.
So I guess Ryan Mason is in charge for the rest of the season. A cool appointment.
It is a cool
the fact
appointment.
that a 29-year-old is academy product, a guy who literally was teammates with guys like Kane, like going up through the ranks as little kids. That they're like that he's the guy that's now the interim manager. Like it's a super cool story. Hard not to root for him. Yeah, I get. Let's start there. Like, how do you feel about that?
It doesn't inspire confidence in like achieving results. But that's, I mean, we were always going to have a caretaker. There was no way Spurs were going to have a plan B ready to execute when they fire someone like Mourinho, especially the time of the season that we're in right now. Like
nobody would have somebody to come in right away like that at this time.
But like I do, like I like Ryan Mason, as a former Spurs player, an academy product. It was his boyhood club, all the above. Like the romanticism aspect of that is really cool. And given, Ryan Mason's career trajectory was cut short through injury, like he had to retire at 26. And it's kind of cool seeing him get a little bit of a redemption story, hopefully, out of this entire thing. And maybe it will launch him into, a better coaching career as well. But yeah, I mean, it's, given that we're going to be playing Manchester City and there's, the tactical nous of Pep Guardiola that will be facing up against us in this upcoming cup final. And then you have Ryan Mason, who's never managed a team before ever, in the other locker room. Like, yeah, that's a little disconcerting, and it doesn't really make me feel like we're going to be hoisting any silverware this weekend. That's for sure.
I mean, hey, it's a 90-minute match. It's tactics versus graft, and you never know. A lot of times graft pulls it out, right? They get it done.
We did it once in this very cup final against another blue team from the Premier League.
Don't remember. Let's talk about what's next. Obviously, Ryan Mason, I guess, is probably just out of just basic circumstances in contention for the gig. But along with that is like many other much bigger names.
Mm-hmm.
I pulled up Patty Power odds.
Okay.
Let's just run through these. I'm going to start with some not so good odds, but still interesting names. Steven Gerrard, 20-1 odds.
Not going to happen.
Would that be cool? Okay. I mean, I didn't say it was going to happen. I said, would it be cool?
Maybe.
Like, would that be weird?
It would definitely be weird.
Graham Potter, 20-1.
Really? I guess. I mean, I could see that happening potentially. He's done a good job at Brighton, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Fat Spanish waiter, 14-1 odds.
Oh, really? What's Rafa even doing now? Is he doing anything? Waiting tables.
Getting the appetizers ready for someone.
Yeah, right. Writing his blog, probably.
Scotty Parker, 10-1 odds.
He'd look handsome, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's not even in debate.
His body of work at Fulham has yet to convince me, but that may have less to do with him and more to do with the squad.
A man that everybody loves and no one has seen in a while, Eddie Howe. Has the room cooled on Eddie Howe?
I mean, I feel like if it were 2018, like that would seem like a really hot link, but now it feels like he hasn't even been hired by a championship club. Like it makes me feel like that's definitely cooled off a bit.
So he was at 17-2 odds.
Mm-hmm.
This one seems actually extremely unlikely, just given the circumstances. Brendan Rodgers, 13-2 odds.
This is the one I fear the most. Like, if there's any managerial appointment that I don't want, it's Chiclet Teeth coming over and setting up his smug face at White Hart Lane.
Well, if you're not happy about that, you're gonna hate who's at 7-2 odds right now.
Bring it.
Mauricio Sarri. And there are multiple reports that contact from the club has been made with his people. I don't know even who that would be. The guy that sells him his smokes. I'm not sure.
Yeah, probably. I know this guy who sells loose cigarettes down at the corner pub, and he sells a bunch of them to Sarri. And yeah, I don't know. Mourinho seemed antithetical to like Spurs' ethos of attack, attack, attack. Sarri also fits that mold, but like given that we just hired Mourinho, I'm guessing that's all out the window now anyway.
Obviously the one that everybody wants, 11-4 odds, Nagelsmann.
That's the one I want if I can pick anyone. But he to me he feels like he draws a lot of parallels to Pochettino and the way that he played. And, he's probably the most in vogue manager that we're linked to at the moment. But I'm very worried about the potential Hansel Flick to Germany and then Nagelsmann to Bayern situation. Like those things bother me. So we'll have to see what plays out on the German front first.
I was disappointed to not find odds for Jurgen Klinsmann.
Talk about a manager whose star has waned or temperature has cooled on. Old Clinzy is just not getting looks anymore.
Here's an interesting and probably one that is somewhat exciting. 25-1 odds, Jesse Marsch.
I'd take it. I mean, obviously it would not go over well in the press for poor Jesse. But
I'm sure. The last American manager in the Premier League, it went so well. So I don't see the problem here.
Yeah, I can barely even remember Bob's shiny head spending any time over there in Wales.
Yeah, they try to not. Well, it didn't shine so much, partly because the sun is never visible in Wales, but that's also because it was just a disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. So okay, so let's take Nagelsmann off the board. Obviously, that's the one everybody wants. Of all the names I threw out, who would you be the most happiest for?
Oh, geez. Of all the ones you threw out, I have to pick from that group. Could I conjure up someone who's not on that list instead? I don't know. If you're talking like
Frank ain't taking the job.
Yeah, right. If you're talking European, experience, Sarri is probably the one that I would be like, okay. I really don't want any of them. Like maybe Scott Parker just because of the Spurs ties, but like to me this is like that time, like they went big for Mourinho. Like they showed ambition for Mourinho. If you go and pull some like weird low level one out of the equation, I don't know, just it would feel like a big step backwards in what Spurs are trying to do. And they're in a tricky situation because if they get this one wrong, it really makes the whole Mourinho thing seem even worse.
Makes that whole let's fire Pochettino thing look pretty stupid.
Yeah, just
also making that look stupid, the current Champions League semifinals.
Yeah, right. I would like to not focus too heavily on that given, PSG are looking really good at the moment.
That's all I have. Do you have any other parting thoughts? Obviously, the whole manager thing won't be decided for a bit. Obviously, Ryan Mason's going to have him till the end of the season, so this is going to be a June talking point, not so much a now talking point. So just something to start, kind of mulling over.
Looking forward to several months of fretting over how this is going to work out.
Exciting stuff. Winners and wankers?
Yeah, winners and wankers. Now, I tried to steer my way away from all of this chaos because it's so easy to just point fingers.
Easy slam dunks on the wankers, yeah.
Yeah, it felt too easy. So for my wanker this week, I'm actually going over to German soccer, which has been the bastion, the saviors of soccer because, they're too puritanical to actually go and do all this, even though Bayern were 100% involved in the early conversations of this big thing. But all that said, where I'm going with this is actually to a club that I follow a little bit within the league, and it's Schalke. And I'm going to give the wanker award to not the club for getting relegated this weekend after losing to Arminia Bielefeld, but also to their fans.
Lost to an Armenian team? They're not even losing to German teams anymore.
I know, right? Gosh. They're not even in the right country. No wonder they're getting relegated. But no, Arminia I can never say this, Bielefeld is the name of the club whom they lost to. But anyway, long story short, upon the bus returning back to Schalke, in their home stadium. There was a group of fans there ready to greet them passionately about how displeased they were with the relegation, and they literally attacked the players getting off the bus, throwing eggs at them,
Right.
chased some guys around the stadium apparently. Man, I understand being disappointed about relegation, and things have really gone down the chutes at Schalke this season, which is frustrating for them. But you cannot attack the players. Like this is still just a game, guys. Like you can't literally assault people over a sport.
Also, like chasing a professional soccer player around a stadium is just a losing proposition. There, I don't know what supporter that was, but I'm gonna go ahead and say they're not closing that person down.
Hopefully the guy wasn't wearing slides, like he's,
Oh, I mean, yeah, I guess maybe if they had like their lounging on the bus shoes on, that could have been a problem. But I'm pretty sure they were not winning that foot race.
no, definitely not. What about your wanker this week?
My wanker, we got all excited about it last week. Hey, 5 matches on national television here in the U.S. for MLS opening weekend. And I tried to take a little nibble of all of them, watched as much as I could of all the MLS, but with the national broadcast, no matter if it was ABC or their other version of ABC known as ESPN or FS1, this concept of, hey, let's talk to a manager in the middle of a match.
Oh my God.
Why are we doing this? Who wanted this? Who asked for this? How these managers haven't literally taken the headsets as they're being handed to them and just chucked them into the empty stands right now is the fact that Bob Bradley agreed to it in a match is like a sign of the apocalypse. I cannot believe that actually happened.
Yeah, I mean, he's piping mad every time he has to put it on. But what it was amazing about that Bradley situation is he dropped the most interesting thing we've ever heard in an MLS sideline interview during the course of a match, where he literally admitted that he accidentally subbed out Carlos Vela like minutes before that.
Oops.
If nothing else, and we all know why this is there. This is just we see these mid-game interviews in other American sports, and MLS is desperate to try to make themselves seem relevant or passable to the casual American sports fan.
I'll go as far as to say they're terrible in all sports.
Oh, they're definitely terrible in all sports because it's such a distraction from what you're actually trying to watch.
You can tell, like, whether it's MLS manager or the manager of the Cincinnati Reds, they don't want to do this. They do not want to do this. They're trying to manage a game right now.
Yeah.
You are distracting them from the job. This is their job. Like you're getting in the way. Broadcast the game. Have your sideline person, kind of maybe get a word in with them and just get some, little nuggets of info that they can relay back during the broadcast. But we got to stop this.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need this stuff. That Bob Bradley gave us a rare gem in the middle of one doesn't mean that we should expect that every time. Yeah, right. Get these things out of here.
No, they're normally pretty terrible because the managers are trying to say as little as possible because they're trying to get the interview over with because, oh yeah, that's right. I don't think I've said this yet. They're trying to manage a game. They're actively working.
Yeah, and they're very high stakes job.
Yeah. Like it's literally the most stressful part of their entire job. And you're picking that moment to be like, hey, what's your thoughts on the game so far?
Remember that thing you messed up? Why did that happen?
Yeah.
Oh, terrible.
You guys are getting beat down the left. What are you going to do about it?
Do you see that? We see that.
That was my wanker. Your winner.
My winner this week. I'm actually going with 2. You tweeted about it earlier today. I've got to give it up to our boys, Jamie and Kyle from Rhinehouse, who are calling their time at our favorite local soccer watering hole here in Cincinnati. Jamie, also known as Wonder Brown, and Kyle, who's been the manager at Rhinehouse, have been hands down two of the most important people in helping to build Cincinnati's soccer culture over the last nearly 10 years. Honestly, like the amount of time that this podcast has been a thing, we've been working with those two guys to really help make this a better place for people to enjoy their soccer. And the amount that they have done for opening doors and getting people in and helping people to watch what they want to watch in a space that's admittedly not very large is really a testament to the type of people they are. And like, it's really cool. Like, I never expected to start going to that soccer bar, and then ultimately 7 years later have some guys that I consider friends that, you know, basically were serving me drinks for that long. And man, I'm sad to see them go, and know they both have really cool things that they're moving on to. And want to say thanks to them for all they've done for me, for you, and for Cincinnati's soccer scene.
Yeah, no, definitely echoing all of that. It's just they're good dudes. I actually have known Kyle pre-Rhinehouse. He was actually in bands with friends of mine. So I knew him back when we were just a bunch of dumb, like 20-year-olds. So it was cool then to all of a sudden, like a couple of years later, then see him again in this new setting where we were both kind of like really entrenched in like the local soccer community, and to kind of grow in that together over the years, and just all the things that they've been a part of and come alongside really any soccer thing that this city has been a part of, from hosting watch parties for us when we were hosting, like when we were doing like MLS watch parties years before a thought of a team coming in this town, to Cincinnati Saints after parties and like staff meetings, and came alongside just some of the other big like soccer things going on. I remember back in the day, like I remember actually pre Rhinehouse, like Kyle, I knew Kyle because we would go with other people and watch the Crew at like random like bars that we would get to like just give us like kind of our own little area to watch the Crew games. And like that was like one of the first times like we really got to like hang out.
Yeah.
And so like to see like back then where it was such an obscure thing to do, to then see him be able to come join Rhinehouse and help bring it up to like the soccer bar in the city, and one of the best soccer bars in this country. And I say that having been to some pretty cool ones, and I know you have too. It is a cool thing and a rare thing still to have something that great, and they helped make that happen. And it's gonna suck not having them around. Obviously, the torch will be passed. There will be other great guys at Rhinehouse that I know Aaron will put in charge to keep the train running as far as that goes. But a end of an era.
Was that your winner as well, or do you have a different one?
I had put on here like one other one, but that feels stupid now to even mention. Like I just put down like that Heineken ad that they put out today.
Yeah.
Which I don't know that said "Don't drink and start a soccer league."
Yeah. Also one of the biggest sponsors of the UEFA Champions League, mind you. So a little homerish there on their own part. But all that said, no, that was great. And probably a good tie-in given, we were just talking about the two guys that handed us beers for the last few years.
I was gonna say, I think I've had a Heineken or two in Rhinehouse.
Yeah, probably have as well. That brings us to the end of this week's show. As always, thanks for tuning in. If you want to get a hold of Jeremy, he's at Jeremy Lance on Twitter. I'm at Wrong Side of Pond. Until next week, when the world of soccer explodes in some new way, we'll talk to you soon.
Can't wait. Bye.